Hello, Flow friends. In today's show, we're going to talk about using Flow to interact with an API. But wait, don't worry. I'm not a developer. You're probably not a developer, and you're thinking, whoa, APIs sound really developer-y. Well, don't worry. We're going to show you how to do it and how we're going to do it as non-developers, how I figured it out. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this app I made to manage my Tesla, right? Because who doesn't want to use Microsoft Flow and some Power Apps in order to unlock and drive their car? So while you watch this intro, we're going to go outside and demo the app, and then we're going to come back in here, and I'm going to help you go from a blank flow to a flow that runs an API. But first, here's our intro. Okay, so since seeing is believing, I thought we'd come out here and start out by just walking you through the app does what we say it's going to do. So then we'll go back inside where it's much warmer and build this out. So here I'm going to open up my app. And so here is my Tesla username and password. So this is the Tesla services username and password. So we're going to log in. And so after a few seconds of loading and the neighbor's dog barking, you can see that it's logged into the app. So now what we're going to do is we're going to press the button for unlock car. And what should happen is the door handles and the mirrors pop out. Perfect. So then now let's go over here. And so I'm going to press start the car. And so then now it's returned. So I should be able to hop in here and say, see you guys later. Brr. Nothing like a brisk 40-degree days to go outside and do some filming. Hi. My name is Shane Young with Power Apps 911. Those guys. In today's show, we're going to talk about using Flow with APIs. But don't fret, right? If you're not a developer, not a big deal, because what we're going to do is we're going to break it down and I'm going to show you how I figured it out. I've never written a line of C# code in my entire life, and I was able to use these APIs. And you also want to be thinking, well, APIs, they sound interesting, but really, you don't have a Tesla, so you're not going to control your car. What are you going to use them for? Well, the first place that I find most people want to use APIs for is interacting with Sharepoint, right? So Sharepoint, there's a whole bunch of flow actions to work with Sharepoint, but it doesn't do everything. For example, one of my customers says, hey, I want to use Flow to manage permissions on my Sharepoint list. I said, no problem. There's an API for that. And because I used this app that's a lot of fun, that was really interesting to me personally to learn APIs, to get over that fear of this developer-y thing, because let's face it, nobody wants to be a developer. Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at you, developer. You can yell at me, leave me bad comments. It's okay. But none of us want to be developers. We want to be citizen developers. We want to do low-code solutions where we just connect some dots. So I'm going to show you how we can do that, and we can learn that, so that when next time it comes up and you're like, oh, I want to interact with the Sharepoint API or some third-party web service or some custom web service that your developers have made for you, you won't be scared of it, because we're going to walk you through how to kind of figure that out and get that connected in. Cool? Cool. All right, so let's switch over here to my desktop. And so on my desktop, for 1 second, I just want to show you kind of the app that we just demoed so you can kind of see it without it being, outside and the dog barking and all that fun stuff. But so this screen is just a simple username and password screen I made in Flow. And when you press connect, or not in Flow, I mean Power Apps. When you press connect here, it's just going to run a couple of flows. It's going to run a flow to validate that's the right username and password, and then get a token back, which says, hey, this Shane is authenticated. And then we're going to use that token to get all the other data. And so in our case, go and get the car's data. And that took us over to this details screen, which I hadn't even logged in, so I guess it probably won't work. So let's do this. And so then you can see, here is the screen that we use to unlock the car, start the car. We can turn on the AC. It also has all these fun details about the car, so lots of information. Okay, so we're not going to get into the Power Apps portion, though. That's not what we're here for. So what I want to do is go over to Flow, and I want to build a flow. We're going to go from a blank screen and build the actual flow that we're going to use to control my car. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and say, all right, I want to do my flows. And so then what we're going to do is do a new, and I'm going to create from blank. I always create from blank because I like to start from nothing so I can show you. If we start from template, then I have to explain what the template brought in, blah, 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 create from blank. Okay, and so when you're learning a new concept, whether it be APIs or just a new action around using OneNote or Sharepoint or anything you want to do, what you want to do is try and make the testing cycle as easy as you can, right? So we don't want to try and boil the ocean and do everything at once here. Instead, what we're going to do is I like to use the Flow button for mobile. Not because I'm actually going to ever trigger this for my phone. I never trigger these for my phone. But what this does, this allows us to trigger the flow without doing something. All too often I see people make their first step be like, well, if a thing gets entered in the SharePoint list that meet these 17 criteria, then run. And so then to test, they have to go over to SharePoint and enter those 17 things, and it takes a lot longer for them to work through the cycle. Here, to trigger my actions, which is what we really want to do, I'm just going to press a button. So it makes it a little easier. So manually trigger a flow. So then we're going to do a new step. And so now we're going to get into uncharted territory. So that's all right. Put your brave face on. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in HTTP. And we're going to ignore all this other stuff. This send HTTP request to SharePoint, once you figure out APIs, is pretty handy. And we're just going to do a basic HTTP action. So click on this guy. And so now it's going to start to walk us through and start to ask us some questions that we haven't answered before, but we're going to figure out what they are. So let's hit the drop down for method. So when you interact with a method, as far as I'm concerned, there's really just two different methods that you're ever going to worry about, right? There's other ones here where you can clearly see there's 5, but we're going to worry about 2 because that's what we as the citizen developers really care about. The first one is a get. And a get does exactly what you want, right? Get me a cookie, right? Get me some Christmas presents. Get me something. So get me data from the Tesla. So in our example, in a minute, what we're going to do is we're going to go get all the data about my car, right? So what is the car's name? What is the mileage on it? All of that fun information is just a get command. Pull that down, okay? But before we can do a get request, we're going to do the other request that we often do as citizen developers, and that's a post. And a post just means I want to post something to the bulletin board, like in college. No. Post means I want to push content out to the web service. I want to write something to the web service. So we're going to post out there, and that's how we're going to post that username and password that I typed in so that we can get this stuff. Okay? So this is the first piece, the method. Now it's like URI. I'm like, oh, what? So what I did, I went out here, I opened up Bing because I actually use Bing on a daily basis, believe it or not. And I said Tesla API. I did a search. And so I read a bunch of stuff, and I found out that this stuff got done by a name, easy for me to say. This stuff done by a guy named Tim is the best documentation for the API. Now, typically you would go and start with the vendor. So for the SharePoint APIs, you'd go start with the SharePoint APIs. But in this case, Tesla does not document the API, but a bunch of super nerds have reverse engineered it so we can leverage it. So then here you can see his site is moved, so whatever. Take me to his new site. Okay, so then I'm over here, I'm like, all right, Tim, you got me. You're doing a JSON API, which just sounds like something I want. So what do I want to do? Well, it says, hey, before you begin, you need to know that this is that URL, right? Oh, well, that's good to know because we know that that's part of what we need. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go over here and say, create me a flow, right? And we're going to go back and we're going to paste this in because we know that's the part. All of these API request things we want to do, this is the URL. SharePoint scenarios, it's going to be your SharePoint site collection is the root, this base URL. So that's what we're going to work from is that URL. So then I'm going to go back over to his stuff. We're going to get rid of his old site. And so then he says, all requests require a user agent header with any value provided. For Tesla's sake, it's recommended you identify your application in some way using this header. Not important to us. Okay, so now we know the base. So then what we want to do is we need to start with authentication, right? Because this particular API is an authenticate API, right? Which is good news because if you can drive my car with it, I'd really prefer you put in a username and password before you do it. And so what you can see is that in order to authenticate, when we authenticate, we're going to get a token back. And this token is what we're going to use with all of our other GET requests, right? So that's what all this documentation says. So when you're going through, you want to go look at the documentation and see what are the pieces of the puzzle you need. And so in order to get this token, we have to do a post. Yeah, right? Remember our choices over here? We chose post. So there you go. So we know it's post. We know we're on the right track here. And we're going to post to OAuth token. So I'm going to copy this. And so just like this, we're going to paste it in. So that is the URL that we need to post to. That's the URL that we want to hit in order to get do our action. So we're going to post that URL, all right? And then now over here it says, okay, you have all of these required parameters. Oh my goodness, this is like where your eyes start to gloss over. You're like, what do I do now? We don't fret. This is not a big deal. So what we're going to do is all right, first one is grant type. So we're going to go over here. And so in your flow, in the body, it says, all right, what is the content that you want? Well, what I'm going to do is your content is always going to be in these curly brackets, right? So that's JSON or JSON, right? JSON spelled without an A. I don't know. It's a weird word. But JSON is not really anything special, right? They like to call it that to make it feel special and to make people like Jason feel very sad. But really all it is structured text. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, all right, well, I have to send it a grant type. So I'm going to put it in quotes just like that. And then we're going to put in a colon, just like that. So grant type in quotes and then colon. And then we're going to go back over to the authentication or the authentication documentation. And it says that you're going to put password description, always password. So they're telling me exactly what I want to put. So we're going to copy that over. We're going to put it in quotes again because we know that that's the way that Flow wants it wrapped. So that's the grant type. Now we want to do another one. So all we have to do is put in a comma. And then I'm going to hit enter because I like to do these on separate lines, make it easier to read. We're going to go back over here and we're going to grab the client ID. All right, I'm just working through this list. So grab that. We're going to quotes, boom, semicolon. And so then what goes in there? Okay, so this says it's a string, it's required. An example is ABC, but description is the OAuth client ID. I'm like, huh? What's a client ID? So I start reading the documentation again. And it says, hey, the current client ID, that's the thing we're looking for, is available here. So let's open that in a new tab. Oh, look, there's the client ID. So all I'm going to do is copy this data that they provided, right? I don't understand it. I don't know where this came from. It just says I need a client ID. So I don't overthink any of this, right? So we're going to go in here. We're going to paste this in. And so just like that, I've put in a client ID. I'm going to do a comma here, hit enter. And so what's next in our list? It is a client secret. Whoop, just like this. So comma, or sorry, so put it in quotes like that, colon. And client secret, well, I was paying attention. It's stored over here. So apparently the client secret and client ID for Tesla changes, Control Z, periodically. So that's why they publish it out here in plain text. But once again, I don't care if my app stops working. I just go copy the new version of it. So we'll do this. And so boom. And right, and this is, you're probably not going to have a client ID and a client secret in yours, right? The Sharepoint API, you don't even have to authenticate against it. It uses Flow does the authentication for you. But we're just working through the process, not as developers, just as people who follow instructions. So shift enter. So then now let's go over here. So then now we've done client ID, boom, boom, boom. So now it wants email, all right? And we can see that's going to be my username and password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this in like that. And then we will leave a spot for that. So we're going to put my email address right there. Yeah, we can put that in there. I don't care. Cincy Shane. My email address is not a secret, but my password is. So then we're going to do password. Sorry, we're not going to do password that way. We're going to go over here. We're going to copy password. And then we're going to do quotes like that. We're going to do a colon. And then I'm going to put my password in here in plain text. So hold on one second while I get it. So pause. Okay, unpause. And I'll blur that out because I don't need you guys logging into my car. But one of the things I want to caution you, right? Remember, we're trying to do this in baby steps. We're learning right now. So later on, you're going to see that I would go, or probably not later on in this video, but later on in your career, you'd say, all right, I want to get that from Power Apps, right? Or I want to pass that in via a variable, or I want to make that an input. We can do that later, but what we want to do today is we want to make this as easy as possible. So I just put it all in here in nice, easy, plain text because I'm not trying to hide my password for myself. I'm blurring it out for you guys, but it's cutting down the number of things I need to troubleshoot. So I've just got everything here in plain text. Okay. And so, right, we had our ending curly brackets that we'd already put in. We do not have a comma here after the end here, but I think that covers this first action. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit save. And now that it's saved, we're going to hit test and we'll say, I'll perform this action manually. So we'll say test. But this is where the button flow comes in handy. There's really nothing for us to do. We just say run the flow. It's going to go run. We're going to say done. Your flow ran successfully. So we're going to click on the HTTP action. And then if we go down here and scroll to the bottom, right, I blur out my password again. What we can see is that we got an access token back and a token type. When did it expire? When was it refreshed? When was it created? So we got data, right? Because once again, baby steps. I wanted to prove to myself that I got this step working before I tried to make a more complex one. We did. Yay us. High five. Boop. So let's go over here. Let's say edit. And now what we need to do, so now we've got a token. We got that token, right? Remember it talked about over here. So when we did the introduction, it said you need that token all the time. Or somewhere in here it does. I don't know. Somewhere in this documentation, it reminded me I needed a token all the time. But so now after authentication is done, and we have a valid credential, right? A valid key, the first thing we need to do is get the card, right? So find the vehicle ID. So I'm just going to follow the documentation. And it says, hey, here's an explanation of vehicle ID versus ID. We don't need that. More important, it says, look, we're going to do a get. All right, I like gets. So we're going to copy this. We're going to go back over here. So we're going to say new step. We're going to do another HTTP step. Just like that. Just like that. All right, developers say this is hard. This is so easy. We're going to paste this in. Oh, nope, we're not going to paste it in there. That'd be silly. We're going to do a get because that's what the documentation said. We're going to paste in, so we know API 1 vehicles is what we want. But then if we go back up here, we're going to grab the whole Tesla portion of the URL again also. So then if we go back, we'll say home. Oh, we got an extra parenthesis. So there, so we've now got our URL. So go and do a get against this URL. And then let's go over here. And it looks like there are no request parameters. Very cool, very cool. But we need to authenticate somehow. How do I do that? Well, let's go back to the authentication page. Oh, so when we do all of our future requests, we need to send it over an authorization bearer access token. So I'm going to copy authorization. We're going to say edit your flow. Headers. Well, I need an authorization header, of course. We're going to put that in our quotes, I do believe. And then we're going to enter our value. And so our value is going to be what? It's going to be bearer. So let's copy that, bearer. And then we need to insert the token we got back from this step. Now we can't just reinsert that body, right? Because there was a bunch of things. There was a date and a timestamp and a bunch of things in there. So what we need to do now is we need to build ourselves an expression to get that piece back. So I'm going to say expression. And we're going to use a little trick that my buddy Vivek taught me. I'm going to click on X. And then I'm going to go back over here. And now I'm going to be able to do the dynamic content. And so in this case, I want to do the body that came back. We're going to get rid of the X. But the beauty of this now is that we've done the first part of our expression. And so what we need to do now is we need to figure out, how do I get the data back that we wanted? Well, I think what we're going to do is say that Shane doesn't remember. No big deal. So we're going to say, okay, here for a second. We're going to go back to our test. We're just going to run another test. And this is another reason I do baby steps. So we'll let this run. The second part's going to flow, not a big, or it's going to fail, not flow. That's no big deal because we haven't finished that part. But if we go back to this step, we can see that, all right, the thing that we needed was the access token. So I'm going to grab access token just like that. We're going to go back over. We're going to say edit. So this body is not only that, but it is also the access token, right? So we want to go, so get the body response back that we just showed, and then get the access token that came back. So we'll say update authorization. I don't think we need these quotes around this actually. Let's take those off. So authorization, bearer, and then our token. Seems reasonable. It seems worth the test to me. So we're going to say test, user test, and save and test. After a few seconds, success. And if we click on HTTP 2, what we're going to see, right, because we need to know this, but look, it came back with in the body, there's a response. This would be important. And in the response is our vehicle ID. Woo woo! Because that is the piece of the puzzle that we're going to need for the next step. So what we're going to have to do, is, right, so we're going to say body, response. Which response was it? So it was the first response, so response 0. We'll talk about that in a second. And then we're going to want the vehicle ID because that's really what we need out of here. So, all right, we're doing good. Baby steps. So last step is I want to get the car's data. So we're going to say new step. We're going to do an HTTP. All right, HTTP. And we're going to grab the whole API out of the URL again. We'll paste that down here so we have that ready to go. But now I don't know what I need to do. No big deal. Over here. So let's go to state. Data. A cache rollup of all the data request endpoints plus vehicle configuration. That sounds like exactly what I want. So we need to grab this API, this endpoint. We're going to do a get. That's good. So over here, set this to a get. Paste in the URL. So we've got the URL. Now notice there it is, the API 1/vehicles and then ID in curly brackets, right? So what they're trying to tell us is you need to give your vehicle's ID, right? There's just not a generic ID. We need to give our vehicle's ID. That's okay. That's what we just got up here. So let's go be brave. Let's delete out their code. And we're going to say, all right, I want to do an expression again. We're going to do the little X trick. Because when we do the X trick, then we can click on the body of HTTP2. Now, what I would probably do before I did this, though, let's just make a little here, right? So we're going to say, instead of HTTP, we're going to rename this thing. Oh, we're going to try again. We're going to rename this thing. So rename. And so then here, what we're going to do is we're going to rename it to get vehicle ID. I like it, right? So making it a little easier to reference. So now back in here, make sure we're between the two pieces like we were. We're going to say expression. We're going to do the X. We're going to click on dynamic content. So get vehicle IDs, body. All right. And what we want is we want the first request. Well, in these requests, though, they use the old school, right? The really weird math when you learn in school for the first time, right? That 0 is actually the first number. So we want request 0. And then what request do we want? We want requests first. So we're going to do like this and this. And so we're going to say request. So we want request, and then we want the 0 request. And then what do we want? We want 0 request, and then we want the vehicle ID. So vehicle _ ID. So I think that's right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do two things. One is I'm going to copy all this. So Control A, Control C. We're going to say, okay, so that will write, it says, nope, Shane, you got that wrong. So what did I do wrong? Let's go look and see again. So get vehicle ID, request. I bet I was not supposed to make those, but those are supposed to be square brackets, not round brackets. Too many bracket types. Okay, so put that in here. Right, remember we just copied that. Let's click on it again and copy it since we got the wrong thing. Control A, Control C. So another trick you might want to do is if you click right here and do add a comment, paste in your code. Oh, I can see the X body is going to mess us up, so we know that's wrong. Let's just get rid of that. See, this is why we paste it in. So let's go back over here. Let's get rid of that X. So say update. But so this comment ability gives me an easy way to read the code without all the scrolling, right? So, if you're not using a third-party tool like Flow Studio, which my man John makes, which you probably should check out if you're into flows, what you need to do is you need to use shortcuts like this to make it easier for you to see what you've got there. Okay, so that's the method. We're going to do a get. We're going to hit this URL, which is going to have my vehicle ID, hopefully hard-coded in there. Then don't forget about our headers, right? Last time when I was testing, I forgot about them. So we're going to type in authorization. And then we need to do the whole bearer thing again. We're going to make the capital B, right? Because we need to authenticate every request. And so what we want to do is we're going to go up here, we're going to click on this, and we're just going to copy that out so I don't have to type all that in again or figure it out again. Expressions, paste that in, and say OK. All right. I'm kind of nervous. Let's hit save. Let's hit test. We'll say perform the previous run, right? It doesn't matter because all the run does is a trigger. So I just don't want to press the button again. So I just say run the last test. We're going to do our fingers like this. Womp, womp. Our flow failed. I wonder what I got wrong. Let's see. So unable to process the action HTTP3 inputs at line 1, blah, blah, blah. Body get vehicle ID, request 0 is incorrect because the thing doesn't exist. You know why? Because request is not the word. But what we can do just to confirm, so go back up here. It's response, Shane. So copy that. Vehicle underscore ID, right? But this is what we're using. The body, the response, the vehicle ID. I bet when you were watching me doing the video, you're like, Shane, you're messing up. Well, I appreciate you trying to tell me, but your osmosis wasn't fast enough. So we'll go back over here. We will edit this and we will change request to be response. We will update that. We will update my comments so that way if I'm trying to glance at this quickly and see what I did or didn't do. So we'll say save. We'll do another test. We will do another one of these, another one of these. Drum roll. Womp womp. Failed again. Page you're looking for doesn't exist. Interesting. All right, let's try this. Let's edit. Let's go back over here. So we've got vehicle ID. Let's go check our documentation. You know what? And it says, oh, you know what? I think that it wanted us to use ID, not vehicle ID. So let's try that. We'll go over here and we will type in ID and say update. We won't fix the comment. You know you're supposed to do that. You don't want to watch me do that again though. So we'll say save and test. Third time's a charm, hopefully. No, third time a charm is not. Oh, but I see what I did wrong. You guys, look, you let me put a typo. API /1 vehicles. All right, fourth time, it's got to be it. So save and test. Success! Let's click on HTTP3, go down here. And so then now we have a bunch of information about my car, like battery level is currently 78%. You needed to know that. Now you're probably thinking it's really weird, right? That I did this demo, right? It's pre-recorded. So why would I leave all the messing up in there? Because this is what happens, right? If you're watching this and you're trying to learn how to work with APIs, you're going to have, I got it in 4 tries. You might have 40 messes up the first time. It's okay, right? Work through the baby steps. I wanted you to see the pain and the anguish, see the awkward look on my face where I'm like, why is this going wrong? Because that's really what's going to happen to you the first time you work with an API. But the good news is every time you do it, right? So maybe this first app takes you 1,000,000 hours to do. That's okay. The next app might only take you 100,000 hours and then 1,000. And then one day before you know it, you are cranking through these APIs just like that. So I really did. I wanted you guys to kind of see me mess up. I didn't mess up on purpose, but I decided not to edit out all the messing up because this is really what happens when you get in and start working with APIs. Okay. But now we've done it. We have successfully got all of this data. And so then the last little step I just want to throw at you is if we want to throw this back to Power Apps. So if you've done anything with Flow and Power Apps before, you're probably used to going in here and saying new step, and then Power Apps like this, and then saying respond to Power Apps. Okay, that works great when you want to return just little pieces of data. But when you want to return this whole structure, right, the 800 lines of code or JSON that it knows about my car, what you're going to do is you're going to say, I want to do a response. And so there is this response request over here. And so this is what you're going to send back. And so this response, then what you do is you take the output of this one. So let's save real quick. So you go to here right, we're going to just run another test real quick, grab it because I need the data. So 1 sec. All right. And so it skipped the response because it has nothing to respond to. No big deal. Go into here. So now that we have this output, right, this body is what I want. I'm going to put the cursor in here. I'm going to say Control A, Control C. We're going to edit our flow. And so then you go over here to the body section and you're going to say, all right, you're not going to paste that in, but what I want to do is I want to say use sample payload to generate schema. So then that way Flow will be so kind as to figure out for us what our schema needs to be. So I'm going to paste in the data, right? The test results we just got, right? My usable battery levels at 77. Say done. I think my wife's driving the car right now, so the battery's going down as we speak. Okay, so that paste and see how it did. It transformed it and said, look, for the ID, that's going to be an integer. For the user ID, it's going to be an integer. The VIN is going to be a string. So it went and figured out all of these things for me. And so if you start getting errors in your response around what can be null or not type of null, this little response stuff is what you do. But you start out by letting Flow generate it for you by taking the test results, right? The results you want to do, package them up and say, use sample payload to generate schema. So that's another one of those pro tips. All right. So I think that about sums it up here. Let me look for a second. Okay, so I just checked the clock. We're good. I can't go a second over 30 minutes, so I got to go back and trim out 3 or 4 minutes of content. I'll figure it out. Don't worry about me. But what I wanted to do, though, is just remind you guys that if you need any help, check us out at Power Apps 911, where we do Power Apps, Flow, Sharepoint, all the fun things you want to do. And then also check out my YouTube channel, Shane Young Cloud. So youtube.com/Shane Young Cloud. I've got Power Apps, Flow, PowerShell, SharePoint, hundreds of videos out there where you can learn, and it's free stuff, and it's even better than the stuff you pay for. So, all right, thanks, and have a great day.